For our third and final story of the Rolling Stone this week, it takes us appropriately enough to Netflix. And I say appropriately because it ties in with the other two stories that we've had this week. Whether laziness is actually empowering, and I pointed out that no, watching Netflix all day until your brain oozes out of your ears, that is not empowering. It also ties in with the point I made in my first video this week for the Rolling Stone, where the battles that we face are cultural and theological. They're not political, because there is no political solution to this. From Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire website, headline: Netflix's The Babysitters Club reboot features a transgender 9-year-old. That is where we have arrived at. That's the way of the world in 2020. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Babysitters Club. I do. I remember going to the library as a kid, and in the kids section there were boxes and boxes of paperback books, which were the Babysitters Club. And it was actually started, the author of it, Anne M. Martin, started the series in 1986. So it is definitely a product of the 80s. And Martin wrote the first 36 books, and then ghostwriters, of course, took over and just used her name. And it is about, as the title suggests, a group of girls who form a club so that they can actually coordinate babysitting together, okay? Kind of corner the market, as it were. Today, of course, their capitalistic endeavor would be just another example of their white privilege. So, but, what was enlightening and daring and imaginative 30 plus years ago is now just the height of supremacy and bigotry today. What's a fella to do? Now, I only came into contact with the books when I was a kid, because browsing, of course, through the kids' books, I would see some of them entitled, "Ooh, the mystery of this, the mystery of that," and I was into mysteries. I was the geek kid who, when I was 6, 7 years old, was watching Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie's Poirot, okay? I was that geek. I loved mysteries. I loved the detectives. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is a mystery. This is a mystery. And I took it to the kids' table and started reading it to see if I wanted to check it out. And after the first couple of chapters, I was like, oh, okay. It's about girls. Never mind. Where's Sherlock Holmes again? I'll read those instead. That was me. So anyway, an inoffensive series, and really a series that was just cotton candy for girls in the 80s and the early 90s. Now that Netflix has gotten its grubby hands on it and has to make it all woke, now we are getting transgender 9-year-olds. This is how Paul Bois at the Daily Wire explains it. Quote, Mary Ann, one of the babysitters, seeks counsel from her friend Dawn, whose father is gay. According to Dawn, being transgender is about as natural as being left-handed. It's like this. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Dawn asks Mary Ann. Right, Mary Ann responds. And if someone tried to make you do everything with your left hand, it would be super weird, right? Dawn asks before adding, well, that's how Bailey feels. The same way that you know that you're right-handed, Bailey knows that she's a girl. We all want our outsides to match our insides. Enlightened by Dawn's woke musings, Mary Ann later takes Bailey to the hospital after he falls ill and lectures the doctors about the cruelties of treating him according to his biological sex. Bailey is not a boy, and by treating her like one, you are completely ignoring who she is, she says. So, yes, we have a situation, horribly cliche, just looking at it from a writing perspective. I mean, the episode sounds so cliche. This is the 4th episode in this series, okay? And one of the babysitters, Mary Ann, is asked to babysit this little girl named Bailey. She finds out that he's actually a boy because she finds a bunch of boys' clothes, and Bailey says, oh, those are my old clothes because I used to be a boy. And Mary Ann realizes, oh my gosh, she was just a little girl all this time. She becomes enlightened, and then she becomes the ally. She becomes the person using her position as, if they stay true to what I read on Wikipedia, she's using her influence as a white girl. So she's using her power, privilege, and position in society as a middle school babysitter to completely kowtow these bigoted and prejudiced doctors. That is where we are now. This show is in the top 10 of Netflix's most popular shows, and it's one that is deliberately geared towards kids. It's rated specifically for kids. So if you have Netflix and if you put all the different controls on it so that they can't watch the PG-13 movies, they can't watch the R movies, they don't even show up on the list, it's not going to work here on the Babysitters Club. You can put as many protections on your Netflix account as you want. Your kids are going to be able to find the show and watch it, and then they are going to be able to become indoctrinated in it, because even though the story is cliched, the script sounds appalling, it makes a very big play on emotion. It presents a little girl, a middle school girl, and therefore the kids who are watching the audience, to associate with her, it presents her as being the hero by completely taking the side of this little boy who believes now that he's a girl and who is being aided and abetted in this belief by his mother. This is what we are up against. This is the real point that I wanted to make, because we've talked about the transgender stuff before, so we don't need to rehash that. But this shows how pervasive the progressive ideology is in our culture. Kids shows now, they don't even have to be sly about it anymore. If you remember just 7 years ago, when Frozen was released, there was a lot of speculation if these two characters were gay, because I guess at one point in the movie, this innkeeper turns around and says, "Family!" And this other guy and these couple of kids are in a hot tub and they wave back, and everyone was like, oh, is this one of Disney's first gay characters? Oh my gosh, historical moment! Now we don't have to be so subtle. In a mere 7 years, we are preaching to kids the trans ideology. We are programming them to completely ignore reality. And by doing so, we're actually programming them to hurt their fellow man. Because reread this part, or listen again to this part, where Mary Ann reads the doctors the riot act when they try to treat this little boy as a little boy instead of a little girl. I mean, that gets so much to the heart of what the trans ideology really wants. Forget reality. Forget what actually helps us. Forget what actually makes us happy. All that matters is that you feel good about yourself. And when you can do that, when you don't even have to pretend anymore what you're trying to indoctrinate kids with, that is a very strong piece of evidence that your side, this particular ideology has triumphed in the culture. Like I said, the steam right now is on their side. This is also a brilliant example as to why homeschooling is not enough. I've been seeing this argument more and more with people on the right saying that everyone just needs to homeschool. As many people as possible need to homeschool their kids. You need to get kids out of the public school system. And I completely agree with that. Absolutely 100%. If you can homeschool your kids, if you can make them a part of a micro school, if you can do anything like that, yes, absolutely, take advantage of it. If you're not married yet, really contemplate doing that when you do get married and when you start having kids. Or if you are married but you don't have kids yet, or if your kids are still too young to go to school yet, really think about that, contemplate that, try to figure out a way to do that. I think that would be one of the best things that you could do for your children. However, having said that, it won't make a bit of difference if things like Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Amazon Prime are still allowed in our homes. It won't, because your kids won't be indoctrinated in the school, but they will be indoctrinated when their homework is done Wednesday evening and they decide to turn on Netflix and watch the latest episode of the Babysitters Club. Hey, this one, has Desmond is amazing. He's the 10-year-old he's the 10-year-old drag queen whose parents allowed him to actually gyrate and perform at a gay club in New York City. Right? Oh, we're really being progressive now. It all has to go. It all has to go because, unfortunately, I hate putting it in these terms because conservatives and people on the right are not supposed to like this term, but there really are no safe spaces anymore. If you buck the progressive ideology, there are no safe spaces anymore. It's all hostile territory. As Sean Connery says to Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when they're in Berlin to get his diary back, we're pilgrims in an unholy land. That's what we are now. Our job is to take it back. Every square inch of it, every blessed inch that was taken from us, we have to take back. But that also means that we have to know what the battle is, and then we have to respond appropriately. So, that's what I've got to say about that, and that wraps up this week's edition of the Rolling Stone Gang. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay free. I will chat at you all later. Ciao.